So in this video I want to walk you a little through my process or workflow of creating music or small pieces of music with the 𝗕𝗀𝗀𝘀𝘀. I'm regularly posting those performance videos, maybe you know them, if not I'm going to link the playlist here, where I just interpretate some pieces of music that I particularly like, and then I try to just play different sorts of sounds with the 𝗕𝗀𝗀𝘀𝘀, try to loop them and try to make it work within one kind of live performance thing. There will be two parts, because in this part I am mostly going to focus on the looping procedure and also how to combine it with Ableton Live and how to just make it technically work. And in the second part, that will be uploaded like in 1 or 2 weeks, and if this happened already you'll also find a link here, I'm going to speak more about the sound design. And please forgive me if this video will be a little messy, because speaking about workflow or concept is always a little spontaneous. It's kind of difficult to plan this ahead. So if you have any additional questions, always just remember that you can drop them all in the comments section. I always gladly respond to them. And before we start, let me quickly say hi to those of you new to the channel. My name is 𝗕𝗍𝘀𝘀, and I regularly post content about music production and performance, and one part of my content is always about the 𝗕𝗀𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘀. So if you're looking for content about the 𝗕𝗀𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘀, you're warmly invited to check out my other videos and also consider subscribing to this channel. So there are 3 things that I use for this whole concept if I'm only using the 𝗕𝗀𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘀, which is, like the pad itself. Then I have this MIDI foot controller, which is the 𝗕ₐ𝗸𝗀𝘀 Softstep 2. You see it on the bottom. It will be a little out of focus on this video, but I'm not going to speak in detail about it because it's more about the general combination of the pad and 𝗕𝗀𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘀. But still, I'm going to speak about it in a little. And also, of course, there's Ableton Live as the software. And of course, the things I say will be kind of specific to my setup, but you will be able to transfer them to your setup possibly as well. So if you have another controller or are looking for your individual way of setting it up, I think you can still find some useful information here. So for a looping setup inside Ableton Live, there are different concepts, but I like to make first one channel that gives me only the monitor sound. So I select here monitor in, then the audio input. And so now I can play, let me just grab my headphones. So now I can play the sound and I hear it, and this is my channel where I just always hear my sound, because then I'm going to create some additional channels, and we can just duplicate for now, at least one. And here it's the opposite, so it's also not on auto but on off. Let's actually say we have one channel that is the monitor, then we have a second channel which I just call loop 1. You can be more specifically if you know what you're going to record, but for now let's call it loop 1 and just give it another color. And you can repeat this like twice, maybe have a channel loop 2 with again another color, and let's make one more which we call loop 3 with again another color. And also on the monitor channel you don't need to select the record arm button unless there's actually a case we'll stumble upon in a second. But you don't need to have this selected for now, because now how it works is basically that you can play on the pad. And let me just grab my sticks. So let's say we play a beat, and once we want to record that beat, we can just use those looping slots. Because this way, if we quickly record a loop into this clip, for example, let's do it. And now we can still continue playing. And if we want to record some additional loop, we just have to arm the next track, which is just handy. So you're always sure that if you play something on the pad, you're going to hear it. Because I have this experience from playing some actual drum set. All the time I play, you can hear it. And so I need to have this feeling that all the time I do something on the pad, it will be audible. But now we're already running into the main issue of course, you're not going to play and just use a mouse here to arm the tracks and to start the loops. And that's where you start to need some type of controller. And you can, of course, use some controller like I have here this Launchpad Mini. But still you need to have one free hand in order to press this pad, so it's also not perfect. And since you're mostly going to use your hands for playing, a foot controller is really a good choice. And there are a couple of ones, but not that many, and also the one that I have is maybe one of the most expensive ones, but it gives you lots of features because you can really individually assign functions to the buttons of the Softstep. So for example, you can not only toggle or push buttons, you can also use it to increase, for example, the amount of ascent or the volume. You can do all those things. So also for the future, it's kind of making sure that you're set for all possible scenarios. Nevertheless, there's one workaround if you don't want to buy any additional gear, which is that you use one of the pads from the 𝗕𝗀𝘀𝘀 as your global record button. And for doing so, you need to have some MIDI connection, and I made videos about the MIDI connectivity of the 𝗕𝗀𝘀𝘀 in the past. I'll try to link them here if you're interested. But once you have this connection, you can then in your DAW or in Ableton go to your MIDI preferences, and you have to make sure that the remote function is selected for the input of the MIDI connector you have. So in my case, the 𝗕𝗀𝘀𝘀 is sending MIDI through a MIDI cable to my interface, which is the audio fuse. And so you have to make sure that the remote button is enabled, because this means that now you can assign MIDI functions to the pads. And in this case, if we click Command M, and here on the top you see this global record launch button, and you have to click on it once, and then you have to think of one pad that you want to use for it. Let's say we use this one. So now you see that it's mapped. We can leave this menu, and now every time we press this pad, it's going to either record into this clip if the arm button is selected, or if there's a clip already, it would play the clip. But if I now press this pad, it's going to record into this clip, which is kind of useful. And in this case, we just have to make sure that we mute this pad. So the problem of this approach is that it reduces the amount of pads that you can use. But so this is my pad number 6. Oh, and now I triggered it again. So pad number 6, and here channel level I'm going to put to 0. So this pad now is entirely for controlling MIDI. And so now if I delete this clip and let's arm loop 1 again, and just try to now use this button in order to record something. So you see, now we don't have to use the mouse again. But still, this is kind of limited, and this is only one pad. You still can't navigate or select different ones, although, I mean, you can always use more as MIDI control pads, but because you only have 6 pads, you quickly run out of them. And I mean, if you play really minimalistically, let's say you only play kick and snare, then at least you would have 4 pads that you could assign, for example, to 4 different tracks. So you could actually record 4 different loops just with the 𝗕𝗀𝘀𝘀. And I want to show you one example of some piece I recently made, which was from 𝗕𝗄𝘀𝘀𝘀 And here you can see actually they're all in the same color, because sometimes I tend to be a bit lazy if I just duplicate the tracks. But usually how I like to do it is, as you see, I have this monitor channel, and then I just like to, with my foot controller, and again, actually I'm going to put it here. So how I like to do it is that I have like those upper parts for just arming the tracks. So you can see that here I can control where I record the loop. And then underneath, I just have the record button for all those individual tracks. I mean, I could use the global record button as well, but I just like to keep it simple, because I made the experience that with looping, you always overestimate your own capabilities really quickly. So I just like to have it super simple in terms of just arming and recording, and always specifically the tracks. So if this is armed, I just record this one, and so on. And yeah, again, the monitor, so I always hear the sound. By the way, if you're interested in improving your technique with some small electronic drum pads, such as the 𝗕𝗀𝘀𝘀𝘃, be known that I have a class on a platform called Skillshare, which is specifically designed for people who want to learn drums, particularly with some small electronic drum pad. And you can always find a link down below in the description with which you can register 1 month for free without any strings attached. You can cancel anytime to just find out if this class could be for you. While the Kraftwerk example was kind of simple, sometimes it's going to get a little more complex. And this is why I also want to show you the setup for the Blue Monday video that I made some time ago. Because if you're just creating a couple of loops, it's nice and simple, like with the Europa one. But here with Blue Monday, I also used some pre-programmed sequences. So you can see here on the right side that I have different sections or scenes, because here I was working with scenes. And working with scenes is super practical, but can also be a little fiddly. So let's look at the MIDI configuration. So here I have selected that I have one button to play the scene, but you also need to make sure that the same button then moves afterwards to the next scene, because otherwise, if you only have the select scene button, you're always going to play the same scene and you can't move forward. But the goal of those scenes is actually that you can move forward in your arrangement, which is why you need to map those two buttons here. Because now let me change to the Blue Monday preset and let me actually get this back that you can see it. So now I have the button here as the scene select button. So you can see I can start the thing and then it moves to the next one. And the first slot is empty. It's just for starting the whole thing, because then I have the click running. Then I recorded this first loop. So just say this was recorded. So I armed it, unarmed it. Or actually I can do it here. Then here I would arm the next track. Then I could record this one. Although I played them already, because that's why, again, I had the monitor channel that I was too lazy to name here. But so then I was recording this loop. And remember that still the scene here is selected. So as soon as I press this button, it brings in the synth sequence. And added to that, I was actually playing here, no, it's in the way, but I was then playing the beat, which was then audible through this left channel for monitoring. So you have to plan your arrangement a little ahead this way. So now, if we're playing and I press this again, there was this break, it's only drums, so I play only drums before I continue. And here it's another bass sequence, but I can control it this way. And here I was just playing the beat with my hands. And also looping, because it was on this channel. And yeah, so let's say I recorded this loop. And then you see I have the fourth channel here, it was still selected. And here I just played in live this dun 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 dun, which I didn't need to loop, so there's no clip of this. And then at some point there's this huge drum fill that I also played through the monitoring channel, so nothing happened, so nothing changed. And then the only thing I still had to do is to select one more scene to bring in the choir, which is here, also pre-programmed. And then I recorded only one more loop, which was then the synth part. And there was a second synth part, but this one I just played live and I didn't need to loop it. And again, it was being recorded through this monitoring channel. And you also need to watch out for a couple of more things, because sometimes here with the choir, you see that here I needed to remove the stop button, because if then the next scene gets selected, this clip will still be played. I mean, you could also put a new clip into every scene, but sometimes you don't want this because it might interrupt the flow of the clip, and maybe it has some type of looping system that goes over the bar lines or is somehow overlapping. So that's something that you sometimes need to do in order to prevent something happening to this clip. And it's very individual, but you should know that every time you run into an issue where some clip gets accidentally stopped, for example, so if there's just a stop button, you can remove it. And so it's also some type of navigation where you record those, because you always have to make sure that then once you're on those scenes, that the clips just get recorded into the belonging spots. And here you see there is the stop button, because I also wanted those things to stop once I selected the next scene. Now you see that my monitor channel is selected for recording as well. And this has the reason that through this I make sure that everything I do will be recorded, because we can move to this next part, which will look really messy, where you can see my recordings. And you see that I recorded the clip here because twice I actually need it, and I don't know which one of those I used, but let's just focus on this section here and activate it, because I mean, now it was recording everything, which means that once one of those channels was recorded, like you can see here, for example, it was also recorded into this one, which means we have like the same sound twice, which is what we don't want. But it's good to have this option for those moments where you actually just played something without recording, which happened here. So let's see which part this is. Yeah, for example, this guitar line that I played. This one I didn't record as a loop, I just played, and so through activating the arm button on the monitor track, I made sure that this was recorded as well. And you have to do a little bit of cleanup afterwards when you go to mixing your track, or yeah, you have to make sure to mute some things so you don't have doubles. But at least this way you're sure that you record everything that you make. And also for this approach, you need to make sure that you don't have this function enabled where you can only arm one track, because I can arm multiple tracks and I always like to do this, especially with the foot controller. You can see that here, we have to change to the other view. You can say that it flashes, so I know if it's with a red flash, it's armed or it's not. And so I can see it clearly for all those channels, which is really, really helpful. And you can select it under preferences. I think by default, it's always on this function where once you arm another track, it unarms the other track. So here under Record Warp Launch, you see it under exclusive. And you can also do it for solo, but I don't like to do this. I just want to be able to press it on or off, but don't have them interact, because this quickly creates some confusion that I don't want to have. And you can also see that here I moved from just having loop 1, loop 2, loop 3. To something a little more refined. I already named those. So you can also see that sometimes there are tracks that are kind of spontaneous and you can record them quickly. You don't have to worry so much about which is what. And here it was perfectly planned. So there are just different options, and I'm still totally experimenting with what's possible. And also, if you see anything where you feel like, oh Jesus, you're always making your life so complicated, also be warmly invited to share it in the comments, because this is just some exploration trip for me as well, and that's just what I came up with so far. Also, one more thing I want to share is the fact that you can always split your audio into left and right, which gives you some more flexibility to later edit or mix the sound. Because for example, here at this kit, you see my kick drum is on the right side and the snare on the left side, which gives me later the chance to edit them individually. And sometimes this really helps also for just adjusting the channels, because sometimes if you record, you try to make everything as good in the moment you're recording, but still you have different types of ears and different focus if you then try to mix it. And I usually realize things that I didn't realize during creating the sounds at first. So I always try to give myself as much flexibility as I can. And also, for example, at this 𝗕𝗿𝗀𝘀𝘀 song, there was this melody. So here I hard panned the bass to the left side and the synth is completely on the right side. So like this, I could also later, for example, add reverb only to this synth line while the bass remained kind of dry, and those things just really help. And yeah, this should be it for this video. I hope it was helpful, probably a little all over the place, but again, just be warmly invited to ask any questions in the comment section, because I also gladly share my experiences with the 𝗕 with the looping, and also really like to hear from you if you maybe have some suggestion how to make things better or any other thoughts that might come up during watching this video. If you're interested in more content about the 𝗕3P, I'm going to link a playlist here with a couple of tutorials, and also here another one with a couple of performances. And apart from that, I just wish you inspiration with whatever it is that you create, and really hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye.